After 13 years of running my wife's dad's company, I finally made it worth $85 million. At a family dinner, my wife and her dad looked at me and said, smiling, "Your wife's new husband will take over now." My heart sank, but I smiled back. The next morning at work changed everything. My name is Nathan Harlow. I'm 41 years old, and until 2 months ago, I thought I had built the perfect life. I was the CEO of Riverside Manufacturing, a mid-sized industrial parts company that I'd transformed from a struggling family business into an $85 million empire. The company belonged to my father-in-law, Gerald Patterson, who'd given me the reins 13 years ago when I married his daughter Emma. Back then, Riverside was hemorrhaging money. They made decent industrial components, but management was a disaster. Gerald was brilliant with engineering but terrible with business. The company was 2 quarters away from bankruptcy when I walked through those factory doors for the first time as the new operations director. Emma and I had met at a charity fundraiser in downtown Seattle. She was 25, beautiful in that effortless way that comes from old money and good breeding. Blonde hair always perfectly styled. Designer clothes that looked casual but probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She worked as an event coordinator for her father's company, planning corporate parties and donor events. I was 28, fresh off a successful turnaround of a manufacturing plant in Oregon and looking for my next challenge. When Gerald Patterson approached me at that fundraiser and started talking about his company's problems, I saw opportunity. When his daughter Emma smiled at me across the champagne fountain, I saw something else entirely. We dated for 8 months before I proposed. Gerald was thrilled. He'd been looking for someone to help save his company, and here I was, young, ambitious, with a track record of turning struggling businesses around. The fact that I was marrying his only child was just icing on the cake. The wedding was everything Emma had ever dreamed of. 300 guests at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, an orchestra, flowers flown in from Holland, and a honeymoon in Bora Bora that cost more than my first car. Gerald spared no expense for his princess. 2 weeks after we got back from the honeymoon, Gerald made me operations director with a clear path to CEO. Within 3 years, I was running the entire company. Gerald stepped back to an advisory role, spending most of his time on the golf course while I rebuilt his business from the ground up. If you're enjoying this story of corporate betrayal and hidden revenge, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts about family businesses and loyalty. And if you think Nathan's about to teach them all a lesson they'll never forget, smash that like button. Now back to the story. The first 5 years were brutal. I worked 80-hour weeks, restructuring departments, renegotiating supplier contracts, implementing new quality control systems. I fired 40% of the workforce, not because I wanted to, but because deadweight was dragging the company under. Every decision I made was criticized by someone. Every change I implemented faced resistance. But the numbers didn't lie. Year 1, we stopped the bleeding. Year 2, we broke even. Year 3, we turned a profit. By year 5, Riverside Manufacturing was bringing in $22 million in annual revenue, and I'd started expanding into new markets. Emma was proud of me, or at least she seemed to be. She loved telling her society friends about her husband, the CEO, about the company's growth, about our increasing wealth. We bought a house in Medina, the kind of place with a view of Lake Washington and enough square footage to get lost in. We took vacations to Europe, drove luxury cars, and donated to all the right charities. Gerald treated me like the son he never had. Every board meeting, he'd clap me on the shoulder and tell the other members how lucky he was to have found me, how I'd saved his legacy, how his daughter had chosen well. But looking back now, I see the signs I missed. The way Emma would get distant whenever I talked about work. The way she'd change the subject when I mentioned new expansion plans. The times her phone would buzz at dinner and she'd excuse herself to answer it, always with the same excuse about a vendor emergency or a client crisis. I was too focused on building the business to notice my marriage was falling apart. Too obsessed with hitting revenue targets to see that my wife was spending less time at home and more time on business trips that never quite made sense. By year 10, Riverside was doing $58 million in annual revenue. I'd negotiated contracts with 3 major automotive manufacturers, expanded into aerospace components, and opened a second facility in Texas. Industry publications were writing articles about our success story. Gerald was being invited to speak at business conferences about succession planning and family business transitions. I thought I was securing our future. Turns out, I was just making myself obsolete. The warning signs started appearing about 6 months ago, though I didn't recognize them at the time. Emma began mentioning an old college friend named Tyler Brennan who'd recently moved back to Seattle. She'd bring him up casually during dinner conversations, talking about how he'd done so well for himself in venture capital, how charming he was, how Gerald had run into him at the country club. Then Tyler started appearing at family functions, first at Gerald's birthday party, then at Sunday dinners at the Patterson estate. He was smooth, I'll give him that. Tall, fit, with that easy confidence that comes from growing up wealthy and never really having to struggle for anything. He wore expensive suits and drove a Porsche, and he had a way of making everyone in the room feel like they were the most important person there. Gerald loved him. They'd spend hours talking about business trends, market opportunities, investment strategies. Tyler would compliment Gerald's vision, praise his engineering legacy, and suggest ways to take Riverside to the next level. Meanwhile, I'd sit there watching, feeling increasingly like a third wheel in my own life. Emma started working late more often. She'd come home smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine, making excuses about dinner meetings with clients. When I'd ask which clients, she'd get defensive, accusing me of being controlling and paranoid. I wasn't paranoid. I was observant. And what I observed was my wife slowly disconnecting from our marriage while getting closer to Tyler Brennan. 3 months ago, Gerald asked me to come to his office for what he called a family discussion. When I arrived, Tyler was already there, sitting in the chair I usually occupied during these meetings. "Nathan," Gerald said, gesturing for me to sit. "I wanted to talk to you about the future of Riverside. We've had an incredible run, and you've done amazing work transforming this company. But I think it's time we started thinking about the next phase." I nodded, assuming he was talking about expansion plans we'd been discussing. The new facility in Ohio, the potential acquisition in Michigan. "Tyler's been consulting with me on some strategic planning," Gerald continued. "He's got some innovative ideas about taking Riverside public, attracting venture capital investment, really scaling up in ways we haven't considered." I looked at Tyler, who smiled back with perfect white teeth. "Nathan, your operational expertise has been invaluable," he said in that smooth voice. "But growth at this level requires different skill sets. Financial engineering, investor relations, market positioning. That's my specialty." "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked, feeling ice form in my stomach. Gerald cleared his throat. "We're considering bringing Tyler on board as a strategic advisor, someone who can help guide us through the next growth phase. You'd still be CEO, of course, but Tyler would be working closely with both of us on high-level strategy." It sounded reasonable. It sounded like a smart business move. It sounded like the beginning of the end. Over the next 3 months, Tyler's role expanded. He started attending executive meetings, weighing in on decisions that used to be mine alone. He'd override my recommendations, citing market research I'd never seen. He'd schedule meetings with key clients without including me, then report back to Gerald about how well they went. And through it all, Emma supported him. She'd defend his ideas at dinner, criticize my resistance to change, suggest that maybe I was threatened by someone younger and more innovative. I wasn't threatened. I was watching a coup unfold in slow motion. The real betrayal happened 2 weeks ago at a family dinner at the Patterson estate. It was supposed to be a celebration. Riverside had just closed its best quarter ever, hitting $85 million in annual revenue. I'd worked for 13 years to get us here, and Gerald had insisted on a family dinner to mark the occasion. I should have known something was wrong when I arrived and saw Tyler's Porsche in the driveway. He wasn't family. He wasn't even officially an employee yet. But there he was, sitting at the dining table like he belonged there. Gerald raised his champagne glass once we all sat down. "To Nathan," he said, "for 13 years of dedicated service to Riverside Manufacturing, you've taken my company further than I ever dreamed possible." Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled, feeling proud despite the knot in my stomach. "And now," Gerald continued, his smile growing wider, It's time to talk about the future. Emma, why don't you share our news? My wife looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Nathan, we wanted you to hear this from us first. Tyler and I have been seeing each other for the past 6 months. We're in love, and we're getting married. The room tilted. I gripped my champagne glass so hard I'm surprised it didn't shatter. I know this comes as a shock, Emma continued, her voice steady and rehearsed. But Tyler and I realized we're better suited for each other. You're a great man, Nathan, but you're married to your work. Tyler understands me in ways you never did. I looked at Gerald, waiting for him to object, to defend me, to show some loyalty after 13 years of transforming his company. Instead, he nodded sympathetically. These things happen, son, Gerald said. Emma's happiness is what matters most. And the good news is, we've worked out a very fair arrangement for everyone involved. Tyler leaned forward, that smooth smile never faltering. Nathan, you've built an incredible foundation at Riverside, but Emma and I feel it's best if we make a clean break. I'll be taking over as CEO effective next month. Gerald and I have already worked out the details. My brain was struggling to process what I was hearing. Gerald had given my job, the job I'd held for a decade, the job I'd used to save his failing company, to the man who was stealing my wife. You're firing me, I said quietly. Not firing, Gerald corrected. We're buying out your contract. Very generously, I might add. You'll receive 2 years' salary as severance, full benefits through the end of the year, and a glowing recommendation letter. You'll land on your feet, Nathan. You're talented. Emma reached across the table, but I pulled my hand away. Nathan, please understand. This isn't personal. We just think it's best for everyone if we make a clean break. You can't expect to keep working at Riverside while Tyler and I are married. It would be too awkward. I looked around the table at these people I'd considered family. Gerald, who I'd made into a millionaire many times, over. Emma, who I'd loved and supported for 13 years. Tyler, who'd slithered into my life like a snake and stolen everything I'd built. And then I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who just realized he'd been playing chess while everyone else had been playing checkers. The smile of someone who understood that the game wasn't over yet. Congratulations, I said calmly. I hope you'll both be very happy together. The relief on their faces was almost comical. They'd expected anger, maybe threats or tears. Instead, I was agreeing with them, making it easy. You're taking this remarkably well, Gerald said, clearly surprised. What's the point of making a scene, I replied. Emma's right. If she's happier with Tyler, then that's what matters. And Tyler, I'm sure you'll do great things with Riverside. You've got a solid foundation to build on. I raised my glass. To new beginnings for everyone. We clinked glasses again, but this time the atmosphere was different. Confused. They'd prepared for a fight, and I'd given them surrender. I left the Patterson estate that night with everyone thinking I was a broken man, defeated, ready to take my severance and slink away quietly. They had no idea what was coming. That night, I didn't go home. I drove to my office at Riverside, swiped my access card that still worked for another month, and went straight to my private server. For 13 years, I'd been building this company. And for 13 years, I'd been documenting everything. Every contract I'd negotiated had a personal copy saved. Every proprietary process I'd developed belonged to me, not Riverside. Every key client relationship I'd built was based on personal trust, not corporate loyalty. And most importantly, every single innovation that had taken Riverside from $12 million to $85 million had been registered under my name in the patent office, not the company's. You see, I'd learned something early in my career. When you work for a family business, you're never really family. You're an employee who can be dismissed whenever you become inconvenient. So I'd protected myself. The patents alone were worth millions. The manufacturing processes I'd developed, the quality control systems, the supply chain innovations. All mine. Gerald had been so focused on quarterly earnings that he'd never paid attention to the intellectual property I was accumulating. And then there were the clients. 3 major automotive manufacturers, 2 aerospace companies, and a dozen industrial equipment producers. They all had contracts with Riverside, but those contracts had been negotiated by me personally. The purchasing managers knew my name, trusted my word, and had my personal cell phone number. I spent that entire night copying files, securing patents, and drafting a business plan. By sunrise, I had everything I needed. The next morning, I walked into Riverside like nothing had changed. Tyler was already in what used to be my office, rearranging furniture and taking calls. I knocked politely on the doorframe. "Morning, Tyler. Just wanted to say no hard feelings about everything. I know you'll take good care of the company." He looked surprised but pleased. "Thanks, Nathan. That means a lot." I was worried there might be some awkwardness. "Not at all," I said. "In fact, I wanted to give you a heads up on something. I've got a meeting with Harrison Automotive this afternoon. They're one of our biggest clients, annual contract worth about $18 million. I figured I should handle the transition personally, introduce you, make sure they're comfortable with the leadership change." Tyler's eyes lit up. "That would be great. Really professional of you." I smiled. "Just want to make sure everyone lands on their feet." The meeting with Harrison Automotive lasted exactly 45 minutes. I introduced Tyler as the incoming CEO, praised his vision and strategy, and then I quietly mentioned that I'd be starting my own manufacturing firm next month, and that I'd love to continue working with them in my new venture. The Harrison team didn't even hesitate. "Nathan, we've worked with you for 8 years, the purchasing director said. "You're the reason we chose Riverside in the first place. If you're starting your own company, you'll have our business." Tyler's face went pale. "But our contract," he started. "Our contract is with Riverside Manufacturing," the director interrupted, "and it expires in 2 months. We're not renewing. We'll be moving our business to Nathan's new firm. One down." Over the next week, I had similar conversations with every major client. The aerospace companies, the industrial equipment manufacturers, even the smaller accounts that had grown with us over the years. The message was always the same. Riverside had been successful because of me, and they were following me wherever I went. Tyler tried to stop it. He called emergency meetings, offered discounts, even had Gerald reach out personally to some clients. But the damage was done. Within 10 days, Riverside had lost 73% of its client base. But I wasn't finished. Remember those patents I mentioned? Turns out the core manufacturing processes that made Riverside competitive were all registered under my name. The quality control systems, the efficiency protocols, even the proprietary alloy mixtures we used for certain components. All mine. I filed paperwork with the patent office officially revoking Riverside's license to use my intellectual property, effective immediately. Gerald called me, furious. "You can't do this, Nathan. You'll destroy the company." "I can, and I am," I replied calmly. "Those patents are mine. I developed them, I registered them, and I own them. If Riverside wants to continue using them, they'll need to license them from me. $2 million per year should be fair. That's extortion. That's business, Gerald. You taught me that." Emma tried next, calling me in tears. "Nathan, please. You're being vindictive. This is my father's legacy you're destroying." "Your father's legacy?" I laughed. "Emma, your father's company was worth $12 million when I married you. I built it into an $85 million enterprise, using my skills, my innovations, and my relationships. The only thing Gerald contributed was his name on the door." "But we're family," she sobbed. "No, Emma, we're not. We were married, but I was never family. That became clear when you traded me in for a newer model and your father handed over my job without a second thought. You want to know what's really funny? Tyler's about to run a company with no clients, no proprietary technology, and no CEO who knows how to actually manufacture anything." The final blow came from an unexpected source. My second-in-command at Riverside, a woman named Sarah Mitchell, who I'd promoted from floor manager to COO over the past 5 years. She called me 3 days after the Harrison meeting. "Nathan, I'm putting in my notice at Riverside. So are David, Jennifer, and Marcus, from the management team. We'd like to know if you're hiring." I smiled into the phone. "Send me your resumes. I'm going to need good people." By the end of the month, I'd recruited 12 of Riverside's top managers and engineers. The people who actually knew how to run the operation. The ones who'd been loyal to me, not the Patterson name. My new company, Harlow Manufacturing, opened its doors 6 weeks after that family dinner. I'd secured a facility in Kent, leased equipment, and had contracts from 85% of my former client base before we'd even started production. Riverside, meanwhile, was in free fall. Without clients, without the patents that made them competitive, and without anyone who knew how to actually run a manufacturing operation, Tyler was drowning. The company that had been worth $85 million was now barely worth $20 million, and dropping fast. Gerald tried to salvage things. He came to my new office, hat in hand, looking 20 years older than he had at that dinner. "Nathan," he said quietly, "I made a mistake. We all did. What can I do to make this right?" I looked at the man who'd handed me his daughter and his company, then taken them both away when something shinier came along. "You can't make it right, Gerald. You had 13 years to treat me like family. Instead, you treated me like a useful employee who could be disposed of when convenient. Now you're dealing with the consequences. But the company, my legacy. Your legacy is gone, Gerald. You gave it away the night you chose Tyler over the man who actually built it. Riverside will be bankrupt within 6 months. The building and equipment will be sold to pay creditors, and Tyler will move on to his next venture capital opportunity, leaving you with nothing but memories of what could have been. Please, Nathan, there must be something." I leaned back in my chair, the same way Gerald used to lean back in his. "Actually, there is one thing. I'd be willing to buy Riverside's remaining assets. The building, the equipment, the Patterson name. I'll give you $8 million for it. That's more than it's worth now, but I'm feeling generous." $8 million? Gerald's face went red. "The company's it's worth more than that. Not anymore. Not without clients, patents, or competent management. $8 million, Gerald. Take it or leave it." He took it. What choice did he have? 3 months later, Harlow Manufacturing absorbed what was left of Riverside. I kept the building as a second facility, sold off the outdated equipment, and retired the Patterson name permanently. Gerald's legacy, the company his grandfather had founded 70 years ago, ceased to exist. Emma and Tyler's engagement lasted about as long as Riverside did. Turns out, Tyler was only interested in Emma when she came with a successful company and a rich father. Once both were gone, so was he. Last I heard, he'd moved to California and was working as a consultant for tech startups. Emma tried to reach out once, a few months after. Everything fell apart. She showed up at my new office, no longer wearing designer clothes, looking tired and sad. "Nathan, I made a terrible mistake. Can we talk?" I looked at the woman I'd loved for 13 years. The woman who'd stood by while her father gave away my job to her boyfriend. The woman who'd chosen excitement over loyalty. "There's nothing to talk about, Emma. You made your choice. I'm just living with the consequences of your decision." "I'm sorry. I was stupid. Tyler seemed exciting, but he wasn't you. You were the one who really cared about me, about the company, about building something lasting." "You're right, I did care. For 13 years I cared about you and your father more than I cared about protecting myself. That was my mistake, but I learned from it. So that's it? We're just done? We've been done since the night you announced your engagement to another man at a dinner that was supposed to celebrate my success. I'm just the only one who kept playing the game." She left, and I haven't heard from her since. Today, Harlow Manufacturing does $95 million in annual revenue. We've expanded into 3 states, employ 240 people, and I own 100% of the company. No partners, no investors, no family members who can take it away. I wake up every morning in a house I designed myself. No Emma, no in-laws, no fake family dinners where people pretend to care while planning to betray you. Just me, my business, and the team I've built. Sometimes people ask if I feel guilty about destroying Gerald's legacy. The answer is no. Gerald destroyed his own legacy the moment he chose Tyler over the man who'd actually saved his company. I just made sure the consequences matched the betrayal. Last month, I ran into Gerald at a coffee shop downtown. He was alone, looking small and defeated. He started to say something, but I just nodded politely and walked past. Some people deserve closure. Gerald Patterson wasn't one of them. The lesson I learned from all this is simple. In business and in family, loyalty is everything. But that loyalty has to go both ways. When someone shows you they value you only for what you can provide, believe them, and protect yourself accordingly. I spent 13 years building someone else's dream, thinking I was building a family. When they discarded me, I took everything I'd built and made it mine. Now I'm building my own dream, my own legacy, with people who earned their place through loyalty, not blood. Gerald Patterson thought he could take my work and give it to someone else. Emma thought she could replace me without consequence. Tyler thought he could charm his way into an empire someone else had built. They were all wrong. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so successful that they have to watch you thrive while they fail. It's taking everything they thought was theirs and proving it was always yours. It's smiling and wishing them well while you systematically dismantle their world. I'm Nathan Harlow. I spent 13 years making someone else rich. Then they tried to throw me away. Now I'm richer than they ever dreamed, and they're left with nothing but regrets and the slowly dawning understanding that they bet on the wrong man. The company they thought was theirs was always mine. They just didn't realize it until it was too late. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt undervalued or betrayed by people you trusted, leave a comment sharing your experience. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served, make sure you're subscribed to this channel for more stories about people who refuse to be victims. Thanks for watching, and remember that sometimes the best revenge is just being undeniably successful.